Hello, church. Yes, I'm talking to you. You notice the building didn't respond. As many of you have heard me on Sunday mornings, you know almost every Sunday morning I greet the congregation with a "Good morning, church." And every time it's always the congregation that responds and never the building. And that's no different today. I'm sitting here in a sanctuary where we normally gather for church. Many of my friends gather in places like this as well. But as I reminded the congregations on this past Sunday morning, in the midst of all the current situation with a virus that has the world on edge, that this building is the place we gather. It is not the church. We are the church. And whether we're gathered here or not, we're still the church. I wanted to remind you of that because I think it's extremely important on these days when it's really dangerous for us to gather together. I know some are minimizing that, or some are mocking it, or maybe giving you a very different message, but I want to challenge you to pay attention to the health professionals. I've been tracking this virus since it broke in December in China, and I've really not been listening to the politicians too much. I've been listening to the medical professionals, and lately I've been making phone calls and talking with people that know the challenges that we face. I have one concern, and that is that the church I serve, and as a Wesleyan, John Wesley said, "The world is our parish," and so the world is my parish. I'm concerned about all of us around the world. And what part of that concern is a need for us to do safe practices. And that will include, at least for the next 2, 3, or 4 weeks, and who knows, maybe longer, that we not gather here to worship. Let's be reminded of why we come to the sanctuary. We come to the sanctuary to worship and to give praise to God. God does amazing things in our lives, no matter where we are. I often remind people that God doesn't miss anything. He knows every action we take, every word we say, and He even knows every thought we think. And so as we gather wherever we are, we should be gathering in much smaller groups and maybe in different ways. I've been experimenting with different technology, and as an old guy, sometimes that can be a challenging now. But I'm learning. I've done a number of video conferences. I've been encouraging our leadership to gather that way, and I'm going to continue to do that. I've been doing my coffee and conversation. Some of you know that I like to have a good cup of coffee, and I usually do that in a restaurant and gather with some folks from the community. I'm trying to do that now online using Zoom and finding that kind of fun. We did that today, and we had 5 or 6, and I hope to continue doing those kinds of things. But just because we're not here to worship doesn't mean that we are not in the presence of God, because we are always in the presence of God, wherever we are. And so if I believe that, and I do believe it, then I have to trust that God is with us wherever we are. I wish I had easy answers for us as a church. I don't believe there are easy answers in these trying times, but I do trust that God knows what's happening. And I'm going to put my trust in Him. I'm one of those in the at-risk group. I don't like to admit it, but I'm over 60. And not only am I over 60, but I have an underlying condition. Now you might say, well, what's that? Does it really matter? I want to ask you about the people that you are surrounded by. How many of them might you say, well, what do you mean you have an underlying condition? How many people have a condition that you don't know about? I'm guessing there's quite a few. I'm guessing that you all have people that are over 60 in your lives. I'm guessing, as we've been learning in the last few days, that really 60 isn't some magic number. I've been learning as I've watched the news and read, particularly on things like the CDC website, that this virus is attacking and hospitalizing many people that are much younger than 60. And it's a serious situation. And so in these trying times, I want to challenge you to use wisdom. I want to challenge you to trust God. Knows what's going on. And while we won't gather here for worship, know that God is where you are, God is present, and God is still hearing, knowing even what you think. And so I want to challenge you as we look for new ways to communicate and lift one another up to be the church. For some that are young and healthy, that might be making sure some of the old people get cared for. That might mean that you could go pick groceries up for somebody, or there are many things that you can do. But you know what? Age doesn't matter. I often say that there is a job in the church for everybody, and I believe that is true today. A telephone call. It's the way I've had to connect to a lot of people in the last few days, either online or picking up the telephone and calling them. And as I've called to check on them, it's been appreciated. But we are the church. You're the church. You have an opportunity to be the church today. No, not gathered in this building or one like, excuse me, but you can be the church where you are. You can make sure that your friends and relatives, and maybe even somebody you don't like, is doing okay. Wouldn't that be being the church? I want to encourage you today to continue to look for ways to be the church. And until we can safely gather again in our places of worship, I want to challenge you to worship at home. Do you know what worship really is? It's giving praise to God. And I want you to know that I give praise to God for every one of you, whether we agree on things or not. And we all know that we don't agree on everything. It doesn't really matter. The call from Jesus is to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. The call from Jesus was to love our enemies and to care for those less fortunate. I want to challenge you to do that. You know, on that last night of Jesus' life, when he gathered with his disciples, the first thing he did was wash their feet. And then after that meal, towards the end of that meal, he challenged them to love as they had been loved. And so Jesus is challenging us today to love as we have been loved, to reach out and love even those that hate us. It's not easy sometimes, but it's what we're called to do. And so until we can gather in our sanctuaries and give praise to God for what he's done, let's lift one another up. I'll be praying for you. I'll be lifting you up. I'll be probably challenging you in different ways from time to time, as I have always done. If you've ever heard me on a Sunday morning, I often say to folks, I never want people to leave without something to think about. So that's my goal today. I wanted to give you something to think about. I wanted you to think about what difference you're making in the world. If you know me, you know that oftentimes in my offices over the years, I had a board in there that I would write "Go Mad" on it. It meant go make a difference. Go out into the lives of others and make a difference in their lives. Maybe it's challenging the way they think. Maybe it's just caring. You know, sometimes it's just simple smile or meeting somebody where they are. So wherever God's calling you to reach out and meet the challenges of being the church today, I hope you'll accept that challenge. Know that you are cared about, not just by me, my friends. I love you, but I also want you to know that God loves you too, even in these midst of these challenging days. And I look forward to the opportunity to gather again in a place like this and bring you praise, bring God praise, and worship once again. Until that day, know that you are not forgotten, and I look forward to new ways to connecting with you. I hope that you are being blessed.